So my TAI this year is all about how using rich tasks can integrate STRAND and develop the mathematical thinking of the kids in my class. Our reflective question this week is, how do our school values link to my TAI, and how can I increase the kids' ownership of these? So this week that's just gone past, I introduced rich tasks to my class, and this reflective video is going to be talking a little bit about how our values link to that. So on the first day, I introduced the rich task to my class. It was all about how there were a certain number of sheep in one paddock and a certain number of sheep in the second paddock. The farmer moved some sheep from the first paddock to the third paddock, from the second paddock to the third paddock. So to work out the answer, the kids had to first of all work out how many had been taken out of the first paddock, how many had been taken out of the second paddock. So those were subtraction problems, and the third paddock was an addition problem. I pretty much had the class sitting in a circle and just put them into pairs, so it was whoever they were sitting beside. They didn't have any choice or didn't have any time to move, so it was quite good to see the way that they worked together and talked about stuff. Saw lots of perseverance happening. Kids were having to be confident to give things a go. I just sort of stepped back and facilitated discussion as opposed to giving out answers or showing them how to get the answer. I went around and I sort of circled the keywords in the actual question, so the kids were thinking more carefully about what it was that I wanted them to solve. So after the first day, I could see pretty clearly that quite a few of them were a bit confused still. I hadn't provided any how to do it instructions. There was a group of 3 boys who just smashed it. They knew exactly what they were going to do. So for those 3, these guys, I changed the problem. It was a similar kind of problem, but instead of 3 paddocks they had 4, and instead of 2-digit numbers they were subtracting and adding from 3-digit numbers. So I handed them the problem, I sent them outside and I said, come back when you're done, which they did. They came back looking a bit confused, but we talked about that the following day. The rest of the class, we sat together, and this time I gave each of them a copy of the same question as the previous day. They had a bunch of materials they could use, and I said, now work it out using this stuff. They did it in lots of different ways. They were creative. Some of them wanted their beans to look like the sheep in the paddock. Some of them just used them as counting tools. Some of them saw pretty quickly that they didn't actually need, once they could see them physically, they could then take them away and just write the number of the sticks or whatever the problem was that they were working out. So it was actually really cool. They're also responsible. They got the material out, they had to put it away. Lots of resilience because they weren't always right. And it just gave them a whole lot of a much better comprehension of what it was that they needed to be actually solving, understanding of the problem, because even some of my really good mathematicians were in with that group, but they just hadn't really understood what it was that I wanted or how to work it out. So the next day again, I gave them a really similar type of problem. I changed the numbers around a bit, sent them off to do it. They could use a range of resources. They were responsible for how they were working it out. They had to persevere until they got an answer. They had to be responsible also because I wanted them to post their learning on Shobi, which meant they had to make and explain everything. If they'd worked with a partner and the partner had done all of the work, it was pretty easy to hear from the previous day's uploads. So it was good. In a way, I also managed to pull some of the kids down who I'd seen working with a partner and not really understanding what they were doing. I'd adapted it to be quite simple for these 2 guys here who are working at about sort of early stage 4, stage 3. One of whom still one-to-one counting, but I just changed the numbers up so that they could clearly see the maths problems they were building with the beans. These guys, they had their 4 paddocks, they had their bigger numbers. They spent some time with me going over actually what the questions were asking, because they'd missed out on the previous day, and then they'd managed to come up with answers, although they hadn't explained their thinking. So we went through how to show what their thinking was for each of their problems. So on the final day, I had the the kids finishing off problems or working with me. So I had a bunch of the stage 5 plus kids come down and begin using empty number lines as a way of solving problems, because I could see that when the final part of the question was from your 3 paddocks, how many, say there was 23, 24 and 32, how many sheep are there altogether in each of those paddocks. So we were looking at strategies like adding the 10s and then adding the 1s and then putting it all together. What have you got? They hadn't quite understood that that was also another part of the question, but I found that the rich tasks and the adapted way I did it and the building on it over the few days really helped to solidify the way that they needed to be solved, and B, different ways of solving problems. It was also really clear to me which of them, like lots of my quite confident maths people were counting on in 1s and that kind of stuff, and so it showed me that I need to build on the strategies that they have, and so I'm going to continue using rich tasks in this way. I need to integrate more of the strand into them, but this was a really good sort of foot in the door beginning stage of the possibilities of things to come.